I truly have no idea why people are so down on Ron Holland after his season in the G League. I mean, I do kind of know why, and I think the valuation of his efficiency and some of the things he did are kind of off and misguided. And I hope to make that case in this game. And Holland's legit star upside on the offensive end, because defensively he's incredible. I think most people tend to agree on that, and I believe the defensive ceiling is truly all NBA. But Holland's driving and advantage creation are super rare for a wing sized guy, and I want to kind of show that off. And having wings who can create advantages at the clip Holland does and finish them like he can is one of the true most valuable traits in a prospect, where Holland has the burst to win downhill whenever he wants and the vertical explosion to dunk at the rim over his defenders whenever. Holland is so good at self-creating these dunks, which are, pretty much the highest value shots in basketball, dunking the basketball. It's hard to miss those. But Holland is elite attacking the open floor. One quick crossover to buckle this defender, nobody even coming near him, and he's able to hang in the air and finish with his offhand. Holland is so good at accelerating and attacking space, where look how wide open the paint is. And even though there's theoretically time for one of these players to come down and rotate, Holland is so fast and explosive, and he's literally getting dragged down from behind, still able to explode and finish. Holland not only has this incredible burst, explosion, and advantage creation ability to bend defenses and get to the paint whenever he wants, he's also one of the strongest 18-year-olds. And yeah, Ron Holland is only 18 years old and was producing like a star in a G League, which has plenty of its faults, but is a league full of enough adults to really make this impressive. And Holland, he isn't a perfect prospect, as we're going to get to. We'll definitely talk about the weaknesses, and his finishing consistency is one of them, where Holland easily wins off the dribble with burst, accelerates past him, but just kind of smokes this layup hard. And I think it's less about touch as it is choosing finishing angles and relying on jumping too early and over-relying on his athleticism to convert some of these finishes, which is understandable given the degree to which he was dominant as an athlete. It makes sense that he would kind of rely on those things. One of my favorite traits of Holland as a driver is how he's willing to straighten off and flatten his angles to get all the way to the front of the rim, where a lot of players, where like this, where they maybe loop around, but Holland, because of his great flexibility, he gets below this defender. He has the burst to get in the middle, and again, we kind of see, I don't love him like jumping in traffic really, but he is such a talented finisher that he can kind of get away with this stuff. And I think people maybe have over-indexed on some of the decision-making concerns, where maybe the quote-unquote right play would be to kick to London Johnson in the corner, right? I think Ron's passing vision is great, and we'll get to that. But it's super common for extremely high-usage teenagers who basically, Ignite asked Holland to be their primary scorer to falter in terms of basic decision making. And I think that's certainly the case with Holland. Not that he's just incapable of playmaking. He has the kind of speed where even if you sag off of him, which teams will do because of his shooting concerns, which we'll get into a little bit as well. Ultimately, I don't worry as much about the shooting as others do. He has the burst to just totally blow by. And I think the handling improvements Holland's made this season are significant and deserve to be talked about more. So this was really Holland's first year, like fully operating on the perimeter, and he made big strides as a creative, dynamic handler, as we can see Holland using a great little jail into hesitation to blow by and ends up smoking a layup. Once again, I think it would be better if he popped here, played off of 2 feet. The finishing technique is going to be an improvement point, as we'll see throughout. But quick reject, jail, notices this kind of pump fake, hesitation, switch to the other side. That is advanced stuff. And even if the control isn't perfect, the decisiveness, the flexibility, how dynamic he clearly is dribbling the basketball, all really impressive. But he definitely does need to work on his ball control, as there are times when he will just kind of fumble the ball in traffic. Again, a common thing I think about a guy like Anthony Edwards, who literally would just drop the ball not against any pressure in high school and college. And Ron is kind of the same way, where he's so fast and explosive that sometimes the ball leaves him behind. I didn't mean to show that clip twice. But yeah, Holland definitely can use some work. Though once his handle does hold up, it's totally free to the rim, where again we see this kind of open paint where you'd think one of these defenders should be able to rotate, but nope, Holland just explodes through, hangs in the air, and finishes at full speed. His finishing diet is so difficult as we're watching, and I do think part of that is because of his own decision making, but also because of how bad the spacing was at times, even though it's good here, and how bad and weird his teammates were. But Holland's ability to hang in the air at full speed and softly flick the ball, spin the ball off the glass with great touch, shows up all the time on his tape, and I'm pretty bullish on Holland's becoming a really good finisher at the next level. Like, this shit is crazy. Holland's ability to, again, win downhill, get low and Euro step past his defender, hang in the air, flick this shot up. It is crazy stuff. And Holland is truly one of the strongest teenage wings I've ever watched. And I think he can continue to get stronger. He looks like he has room to fill out, but Holland's ability to push off and throw defenders away on his drives is so impressive at this level, where these oftentimes, like, adults will have zero chance hanging with Holland. And his lower body especially is so strong, where he can bump Euro step right now, kind of using his elbow as leverage, throw off this defender, maintain his balance, and finish with great touch off of his off foot there. This to me is a special creation tool that I don't think is going to go away at the next level, where Holland is just going to keep getting stronger. He's only 18, right? It would be kind of surprising if this was the strongest he ever got. And even now, he's so confident at throwing older defenders away with that strength. But I do think Holland's ability to get downhill and just live at the rim is really, really evident, and the touch is as well. This is another play and an example where I don't love the finishing decision, like a running hook in the paint over two defenders. I don't love this decision. But one, the fact that Holland has the confidence and ability to make these kind of diverse finishing angle shots, I think of as mostly a good sign. And the history of these super young players who get to the rim a ton and have a baseline of passing competency is pretty great, honestly. Obviously, plenty of guys who didn't end up making it, but Zion, Simmons, Paolo, Wall, so many players, Jaylen Brown, RJ Barrett improved massively, we'll talk about later. Very few guys who just were totally out of the league. Even a guy like Dennis Smith, who didn't really hit his ceiling, I think because of that advantage creation, ended up finding a place in the league as, a role player. We have later hits like Lance Stevenson and John Day Murray, and shout out to Isaiah Collier, who I also think a lot of this video and the things apply. Lou Dort as well, another example of these passing competency advantage creator types, and we're going to get into more of this, but I do think the passing competency thing is pretty underrated for Ron. The level of passer he has to hit, given his incredible driving, is lower than most players because Ron can just live at the basket and draws so much attention from help defenses. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of eyes on Ron, which makes this kick out to Modest in the corner really easy. It's not a perfectly accurate pass, and I think most of Ron's issues as a passer come with this technical stuff. And this is a theme that I'm kind of seeing, the technique in terms of finishing decisions and footwork usage and passing accuracy. This is all very coachable stuff, where the fact that Ron has the tools to get into a position to make the pass is the most important thing to me when evaluating future passing development. This was a beautiful look here. Holland winning baseline with his burst. I don't love that he picks up his dribble so early, but is able to find the cutter with great accuracy and vision. Like this is high-level proactive passing, where Holland is using his own scoring to create opportunities for others. And even on a lot of these turnovers aren't even horrible, where I think Ron, I like him attempting this pass and trying to squeeze it into a cutter. I think even a turnover like this, which is not a great decision because he's driving into traffic and bringing in defenders, showcases a level of vision and willingness to try to make these high-level passes that oftentimes will get cleaned up in the pros. And you can really make these simple pick-and-roll plays. I also want you to notice how many of these shots are blown by teammates, or I guess fouls, where this is a beautiful delivery. Holland wrapping this pass. Is that like I don't know if he megged him here, but somehow bouncing this pass in a crazy tight window to Isan. Perfect pass there. So many of Ron's best passes that I watched this year were not converted into assists, which is, why you have to watch the tape to really evaluate a player's passing. Again, another second side empty pocket pass. Nothing like superstar level passing, but when you combine it with a player of his driving capabilities, that interior passing, the pick and roll capability, some of the skip passing stuff, I think it's all really enticing. And again, we see weaknesses like this where Holland is making the right decision here. He sees the hedge coverage and his big correctly slips. Holland just has to bounce it into space. And I also think you can probably argue that the big maybe isn't rolling hard enough here. But Holland still maybe could definitely make a more accurate pass here. But this is a very fixable thing compared to a player who doesn't have the vision to anticipate and pass into space like Holland does here, where there isn't necessarily a clear opening right now, but Holland knows that his defender is moving towards open space, and like a great quarterback is going to lead him to that space where defender can again catch a not perfectly placed pass, as we're seeing. But this is 18-year-old mistakes to me. Nothing that is so damning that I don't think can clean up. I loved the creativity-ish on this like elbow snake pick and roll where he kind of looks up, almost pump fakes, right? This defender swipes at the ball, and he's able to open up a quick little bounce pass window to Tyler Smith that, again, doesn't end up getting converted into a layup. We see a similar play in that same game here, where Holland gets to this right elbow, pump fakes, reads this help defender sinking down, and kicks it over to Buzelis in the corner. This is all, again, it's not like he's a quote-unquote point guard level passer, but Holland can really make plays. And I do believe enough in the shooting. It's not wonderful, but there were enough flashes of this like step back comfortability, or just comfort in general, to where the history of prospects, right, with this, sub 30% from three with enough volume and a decent free throw percentage, there's a good history of these guys becoming good shooters in the league. Edwards, Keegan Murray, Marcus Smart, Buddy Hield, Mikal Bridges, Miles Turner, Donovan Mitchell, Kawhi Leonard, Tyrese Maxey. Like, not all of these guys hit, right? And I'm kind of like, shout out to Castle as well. And like I said, I'm not guaranteeing that Holland will be a good shooter. Just that I think it is a wise bet to bet on a guy with all of his special traits and tools to become an improving shooter. Because there is a history of these kind of prospects succeeding. I've already made a video on Jaylen Brown. I would recommend you check that out. But I really want to zone in on what he did as an advantage creator as a pre-NBA player, where Brown was extremely raw as a prospect, but he was so good getting downhill with his burst and explosion. He lived at the basket and was able to really get wherever he wanted. There were some flashes of ball handling ability. I love this play here. He splits and he goes for that poster right there. But the explosion, the easy advantage creation was always clear. And Jaylen was able to parlay that as, it took him quite a while to blossom into the player he is, but he improved his passing and his shooting and all of this stuff because of that relentless driving ability that kept him on the floor and that kept putting him in opportunities to make plays and to improve. And I think that's going to be similar with Holland. Again, we see Jaylen winning against college players with overwhelming explosion, burst, flexibility, just moving back this defender for an easy layup there. And a lot of the same issues were present with Brown that happened with Holland, where his feel stuff and decision-making aren't great. He'll lose his handle, take bad shots. There's not really sure what is going on here with Jaylen taking a weird angle and not seeing any potential passing angles. But because Jaylen could get himself into a good position to create opportunities, to draw in help, he improved as a passer because he kept getting those chances. I think RJ Barrett is another interesting example here as a player who made big strides this past year, especially as a playmaker in Toronto, and has improved into a damn good player. And I think, honestly, is a 70th, 5th percentile outcome for Ron. I kind of like if Ron doesn't hit his ultimate ceiling. I think he could still be like a sub all-star level player like Barrett, who's still very young, and among plenty of problems as a prospect, he was so good at being a large wing who got to the rim all of the time with his tools, Barrett was not nearly as explosive as a guy like Holland, and he had these same weird decision-making concerns where it would just take bad fadeaways and wouldn't notice open passing reads like to the big right here. But in the NBA, he's cleaned a lot of this up. Obviously not to the same extent of a Jaylen Brown. We can see him losing his handle, but still managing to get his way to the front of the rim. This is a typical like young initiator type play where Barrett isn't able to maintain his dribble, but with his great movement skills and length and size and some great footwork there at the end, he can get to the rim and end up scoring and creating for himself. He was a really overwhelming and explosive driver at times, and I do see some of what Holland is able to do in this, but probably even better. Holland is not as tall as Barrett was, but he's way more explosive. I think a more advanced handler at the same stage, where Barrett, quick change of direction, gets lower than this defender, finishes with touch. And even though it wasn't perfect, the passing flashes were there at Duke, where his decision-making wasn't consistent by any means, but he was able to make these kind of bounce pass pocket reads and opened up his teammates, where I do think this is a place where Holland could hit as a simple pick and roll side passer. We've seen him make similar reads on the tape, right? These empty side bounce passes using his scoring gravity to open up passing angles and all of that good stuff. And I even think about a player like Colin Sexton, who I wasn't really scouting him, but I remember the discourse at the time of him being like, oh, he kind of stinks, but he's like really toolsy and he's quick and explosive. And Sexton took some time again, but he was always crazy, bursty, explosive, could create advantages at will. This isn't a great decision, right? Hopping straight into a defender and trying to throw the ball over him and ends up getting blocked. But we see Sexton's ability to bend the defense and force help to pay attention to him. And this has helped him, especially last year, blossom into a really damn good player, as Sexton has improved as a shooter and a playmaker massively because he's always been able to get downhill and get to the rim. Obviously, Sexton was a much better shooter than Holland, but much smaller. Very different players. But I think the idea of a player who's the bedrock of their prospect case was winning with advantage creation and ended up improving in other ways because of that advantage creation. I think Jaylen, RJ Barrett, I think Colin Sexton, I think Anthony Edwards, even Kawhi Leonard, all were examples of this case. And there are too many examples of extremely athletically gifted, smart teenagers who ended up improving all of the minutia of their game for me to fade Ron Holland outside of the top two in this draft. I truly believe he is not like a typical number one level prospect in a draft class, right? He has major flaws. And I think there are absolutely worlds where he doesn't hit an outcome as a shooter that he needs to, or maybe his handle never comes along, and he's just a solid, good player. But falling out of the lottery is absurd for a player of his talent level. And in a draft where most of the players don't have interesting ceilings and are a bit lower upside, Holland has this two-way star upside where he could be a player who's not only making all defense teams, but is a great team's third offensive option. And I think that can be enough to carry him to all-star value at his peak. But I'd love to know what you think, and if this video maybe changed your mind on any of him. Would love a like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff if you did enjoy the video. But believe in Ron Holland. I certainly do, and I really do think he's going to be an excellent NBA player.